Hey photographer, Jessica Whitaker here. In this video, I am comparing two popular point and shoot cameras, the Canon G7X Mark III and the Sony RX100 VII. That's a mouthful. And these are each other's equivalent. On my YouTube channel, I teach photography in a very accessible way without all of the complicated technical jargon. I want you to feel empowered by the end of my video so that you can make the right decision for yourself and for your wallet. Huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I'll talk about them in a couple of minutes. I do want to say with this video, I intentionally just kept the cameras on auto. With a point and shoot camera, you want to turn it on, point and photograph. Don't have to play around with too many settings, especially if you are not a photographer and you don't know how to shoot in manual mode. And I do have some side-by-side comparison images to share with you. They will also be linked down below in a blog post. I use these cameras in a variety of light situations, from daylight, direct sun, low light, and of course at night with flash, because the flash of these cameras is why they became a trend. I want to give a little bit more context. I actually have used the Canon G7X Mark III before. February 2020, I had the opportunity to be contracted, go to Basque Country in Spain and create a video with the team. However, I did not get to keep the camera and I was actually so sad about that, but guess what? I wanted to say thank you to KEH Camera for gifting me the Canon G7X Mark III. I've been working with KEH for 7 years and this is the first time I've ever been gifted a piece of gear from them, and so I'm really, really grateful. I was super curious about the Sony equivalent, especially since I tried a Sony for the first time a couple of months ago. I wanted to do this video and I'm super excited to compare the two. So very interesting, they actually both have the same amount of megapixels, 20.1 megapixels. The Canon G7X Mark III blew up last summer and it became a sold out camera, and in fact it still is. These cameras became very popular with influencers in particular because a lot of YouTubers who vlog actually use this camera or an older version of the G7X. And the flash has a gorgeous effect when you are photographing at night. It totally smooths out the skin. I think that influencers who vlog started to use this point and shoot to take their Instagram photos instead of the iPhone, and everybody caught on. It became a trend, and for good reason. It produces beautiful images with flash. It is one of, if not the main selling point of this camera. But let's talk about why it creates such beautiful images with the flash and if the Sony can't compare. Before we go any further, I want to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you're a photographer looking to showcase your work, book more clients, and grow your business, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform you need. It is the easiest place to build an online presence and manage everything all in one platform, from blogging to email marketing to e-commerce and of course showing your portfolio. And as a photographer, having a polished and professional website is everything because it is the first impression that a potential client will get of your business. I myself have been using Squarespace for 10 years now for my photography website. I have always loved Squarespace's flexible website templates. You can start with a beautifully curated designer template and then customize to fit your brand with colors, logo, fonts, everything. And Squarespace has recently rolled out a new website builder called Squarespace Blueprint AI. It rivals other popular drag and drop websites with all of the additional tools that Squarespace has that these other websites just can't compete with. I designed the website for my branding online course, lightscamerabrand.com, using the new Blueprint AI, and I love how easy it was for me to take the designs to the next level. I was no longer constrained to a grid with the design process. I also think Squarespace is the best because of all of the tools that you get, from detailed analytics to plug and play SEO, and the email marketing being in the platform is amazing, and you can even sell physical or digital goods with the e-commerce stores. Photographer, if you are ready to build a website that does it all, head to squarespace.com to start your free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Jessica Whitaker to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Back to the video. Canon is famous for their skin tones. Lean a little bit warmer, which gives your skin a healthy glow. Canon has the skin tones down to a science, so do look gorgeous straight out of the camera without any editing. Sony cameras are known for being sharp, detailed, and very technically accurate. But sometimes that can come at the expense of the flattering skin tones straight out of the camera. With Sony, you're more likely to need to edit skin tones later. Like I said, the flash is one of the biggest selling points for these point and shoot cameras, regardless of what brand they are. The Canon flash tends to be a lot softer and more diffused with soft shadows. The Sony RX100 VII flash can be a bit harsher, it's more contrasted, and it's more direct, which as a result can emphasize skin texture. When you're using the flash, Canon cameras typically are boosting the brightness, it slightly reduces the contrast, and it softens textures in the JPEG, which the JPEG is the file type that your camera is creating. Because of this, it makes the skin look a lot more glowy or creamy and is especially flattering on skin tones, especially at night. But it's not the flash that is doing the smoothing, it's actually Canon's image processor that is making those beauty tweaks. Going back to the Sony camera is more technically accurate. It has so much more capabilities for shooting in manual mode. It is like a mini pro camera. This camera is all about detail, sharpness, accuracy. It's great, and you have so much control over your image, especially if you're going to be shooting in manual mode. We are not in this video. Most people don't shoot in manual with point and shoot cameras, especially if you're not a photographer. But technically speaking, this camera has so much more range and capability. So even in auto, you are getting the benefits of that. And because Sony prioritizes the sharpness, the flash is not going to be smooth like the Canon one. It is going to keep the texture of your face, fine lines, pores, and the processor that Sony has kind of boost up the contrast, which is what's going to make the texture more pronounced. With the Sony, especially with the flash, you're going to get crisp, high detailed images, but it's less forgiving. To summarize, the Canon is warm and it's soft. The Sony is sharp and detailed. Whatever look you're going for is going to come down to personal preference. They both create beautiful images. It just depends what kind of look you want it to create. Let's briefly talk about specs. Don't worry, I'm not going to get so technical, but if you do want all of the technical information, the listings for the cameras will be linked down below. The Sony definitely wins with the capabilities of the camera itself. You have so much more range within the settings. Let's talk about battery life. With Canon, you can use it for approximately 45 minutes if you were recording video on normal settings, not in 4K. With Sony, you can do approximately 75 minutes of continuous recording in normal settings. So that's a pretty big difference. Canon 45 minutes, Sony 75 minutes. I decided to go off of the video setting instead of photography because I really wanted to see more in like minutes rather than in images. This is the last thing I'm going to say about video, but with Canon, you can record for 29 minutes, and with Sony, you can record for 75 minutes continuous. I think that's pretty amazing. Now for the fun part, when it comes to the design, Sony wins, in my opinion. It is so much more sleeker, and it's also a tiny bit smaller. The difference isn't big enough to restrict you from using one handbag or over the other. I love how the buttons at the top are flush with the body of the camera, and on the back of the camera, I like that the screen takes up the entirety of the body. Sony can zoom in much closer. The range for Sony is 24 to 200 millimeters. Canon is 24 to 100 millimeters. Let's talk about the aperture range difference. The Canon camera can go from f1.8 up to f11, whereas the Sony can go from f2.8 to f11. Now for the ISO. The Canon ISO range is 125 to 12,800, whereas the Sony ISO goes from 64 to 12,800. Now it's time to talk about the focusing. The Canon focusing was quite annoying, especially I didn't realize how irritating it was until I started actually using the Sony. The Canon touchscreen focusing is super finicky. Even if you hold up the camera and you hold the shutter button down halfway to focus it, the little green box jumps around like crazy, and even if you so much have a hair swipe across the screen, it's going to freak out and focus somewhere else. So it is finicky. Whereas the Sony camera is very much it's giving point and shoot. It's not so sensitive, making it faster to actually just take the photo and shoot. But the Canon actually focused faster in low light situations, and I believe that's just because of the range of the aperture. It can go down to 1.8, whereas the Sony can only go ratio to 2.8. I'm about to get a little technical, but stay with me, okay? So the Canon has a 31-point contrast AF autofocus. The Sony camera has a 425 contrast detection AF and 357 phase detection. Okay, stay with me, I know. AF points are specific zones on the camera sensor that the camera uses to evaluate the focusing. The more points you have, the more sophisticated of a system, which means the better and the faster that the camera can focus. The Sony camera has both contrast and phase AF points, whereas the Canon only has contrast AF. So why is this? Canon intentionally chose to only have contrast AF points on this camera. This is a simpler and older method. It's cheaper to put in the camera, hence the price difference that we'll see in a second, and it works well for things that are not moving fast, like your cute portraits that you'll be taking with this camera. But the camera does have to guess a little, so it's gonna go back and forth until it determines that the image is sharp. With the Sony camera, it's actually a hybrid system, so you have both the contrast and the phase. Sony has added with this camera both the contrast detection points, like the camera has, but also phase detection autofocus points, which makes this a hybrid system and therefore more advanced. But because it's more advanced, it's a higher price tag. Phase detection, which is what the Sony has, but the Canon one does not, tells the camera where the subject is and how far away they are, so it can autofocus fast. Then the contrast points help fine-tune that focus point and make it sharp. Sony has combined these two to make the best of both worlds, the hybrid, because the contrast AF is very accurate and the phase AF is very fast. Now it's time for me to share some side-by-side image comparisons. They will be up on the screen as well as linked down in the description box below in a blog post. I'm gonna go through the pricing and then I'm also gonna share my alternative thought before you even purchase one of these. I don't want anybody to feel bad if you cannot afford the price of one of these point and shoot cameras. They are overpriced and you should not feel pressure to purchase either. There are alternatives out there and this is not a decision that you should be making instantaneously. Sleep on it. The Canon camera, if you were to buy it new, is $800, but the caveat is this camera is always sold out and it has been sold out since last summer. So you can buy it on the used marketplace. There are so many listings on third-party auction sites and social media marketplaces. However, you are risking it by purchasing from a random seller. You don't know what the camera has been through. You don't know what condition it is in, if anything is broken, whether the seller knows or they don't. I suggest going to KEH.com and purchasing the used camera equipment there. I mentioned KEH earlier. They kindly gifted me this camera. There is no way that I would have been able to afford this camera on my own, so I am so grateful for them. $1,300 if you were to buy it used on KEH. Yes, new is less expensive, but because of the supply and demand, that is why these cameras are going for more. The Sony camera, though, is not much better. The Sony camera, if you were to buy it new, is $1,500. This camera is $1,036 to be exact if you were to buy it used on KEH. I love purchasing used camera equipment because I like to spend as little money as possible on camera gear. I'd rather put that money towards a vacation. I definitely recommend you guys checking out KEH because it is the best place to buy used camera gear where you know exactly what you're purchasing because everything is thoroughly quality inspected, tested, and rated. I should say that these two cameras are in excellent, if not excellent plus condition, and there is a quality tier system on KEH. It goes from excellent plus, which basically means it's like new, all the way down to bargain, which is where I purchase with my own money. And bargain is where you're gonna have some cosmetic wear and tear on the camera, but it doesn't affect the picture quality or the functionality of the gear itself, but it is a way to save some money, and that's what I did with my last lens purchase. I believe it was probably 2 years ago, maybe, the 85mm 1.2 EF lens, which by the way, I do use Canon. I use the Canon Mark IV to the pricing. It is interesting how the Canon camera new is $700 cheaper than the Sony camera new, but because the Canon is so in demand, it's going $500 above retail price. This is my opinion on it being overpriced because I'm looking at it from a perspective of, okay, if you were to go and buy a mirrorless camera for your business, like the Canon R6 Mark II, which is a $2,000 camera, or like the Sony equivalent for $2,500, those are only $1,000 more than the point and shoot. So that's where you have to make the right decision for yourself as a business owner. A point and shoot camera might not be the best choice for you. Maybe it's better to put that money towards that mirrorless upgrade or towards a lens. It's just what you prioritize. What I actually suggest is that you reach out to family members and ask if they have a point and shoot camera from the 2000s that's like laying in their closet collecting dust that you can use with flash and try out for this summer. Of course, it does not have the same capabilities or specs whatsoever. It doesn't even come close to these cameras, but if you are wanting a cute little point and shoot to give you that vintage look, the soft flash vibe that you can post on Instagram, that's going to be a lot more of a practical route versus buying one of these more professional grade point and shoots. If your family does not have one, you can go onto KEH and find some affordable options that could get you on the right path. You can also check out Amazon. I think they even have like an Amazon Basics one. But the point is, you don't have to spend $1,000 plus for either of these cameras, especially not right away. First, give it a go for the summer or for a couple of months and see how often you actually reach for it. Which camera should you buy, the Sony or the Canon? Is this a case of, well, if you're already a Sony user, buy the Sony. If you're already a Canon user, buy the Canon? I don't think so. It's going to come down to which look you prefer. You might be a die-hard Canon fan, but you prefer the results of the Sony with this point and shoot, or vice versa. My favorite is the Canon G7X Mark III. I prefer the overall look of the Canon images, but specifically with the flash. I love how it blurs out my skin and creates more of a beauty-like look to the Sony camera. The answer is subjective. It's gonna depend on what you prefer. If you love getting into the tech of cameras, Sony is going to be your best bet. You will have a lot more flexibility when you're shooting in manual mode. If you still have questions about which point and shoot is right for you, I encourage you to check out my free photography Facebook group called Build and Bloom. This is the best place to ask questions about your specific photography business. Whether you need help responding to a difficult client situation, or you want to give more context on your photography business before making a purchasing decision, like which point and shoot camera should you get, Build Build in Bloom is my best free resource. It's kind, inclusive, and encouraging. You can also listen and learn to the Build in Bloom Photography podcast. I believe in you and I believe in your business. Be sure to hit subscribe so you're the first to know when new free videos for your business come out, and I will see you in my next video. Click right here to watch and to learn. I'll see you there.